Updated one cells in Greek life. L14R, there you are, good. Welcome, my weary traveler of time, to another quiet corner of the past where the air is thick with the scent of olive oil, a hint of myrrh, and perhaps, just perhaps, a faint whiff of social awkwardness. I do hope you don't mind if we dim the lights a touch. This particular conversation might benefit from a bit of soft, golden glow, like that of a Greek lamp in an agora after the day's heat has melted into twilight. Now, before we begin, if you'd be so kind as to share where on this spinning world you're listening from, a rooftop in Athens perhaps, or a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, it would make my evening. And while I'm at it, if you found these little strolls through history pleasant enough to bear, well, you know how much I appreciate the silent cheers and the occasional whisper of support. No need to shout. History has a way of lingering long after the applause fades. So let's settle in. You're here with me, the sleepy historian, on this evening where we'll poke around an ancient habit that's as old as the first blush of embarrassment. The question of whether perfume was, in part, a social camouflage for those among us, ancient or otherwise, who found themselves floundering in the shallows of human interaction. We're going to talk about the Greeks, of course, because if there's one culture that made awkwardness an art form, it was theirs. They were masters at transforming social stumbles into philosophical dilemmas, at turning a misplaced word into a tragedy worthy of Aeschylus. But they also had something else, perfume, in all its sticky, resinous glory. And here's the question I'd like to gently nudge around this evening. Was that perfume just about smelling nice, or was it also about masking the aroma of social incompetence? Let me start with a small confession. I've always been rather fond of perfume. Not the kind you slap on like armor before facing the world, but the sort that seeps in slowly, that lingers in the folds of your sleeve or the back of your neck. A quiet scent that says, I'm here, and if you listen closely enough, maybe I'll reveal something. The Greeks had a word for this kind of perfume, myrban and asterisk, which some scholars translate as unguent. It wasn't just a fragrance, it was a ritual. To anoint oneself with oil or perfume was to participate in the daily performance of being human. It's like wearing cologne today, but with significantly more olive oil and a slightly higher chance of ending up smelling like a sausage at a festival. Now, you might be thinking, well, sleepy historian, that sounds lovely, but what does any of this have to do with hiding awkwardness? Ah, good question. Let's start with the most obvious place, the symposium. You know it, of course, the Greek equivalent of a very serious drinking party, where men, because let's be clear, we're talking about male elites here, reclined on couches, drank wine, and engaged in what can only be described as asterisk, highly structured social competition asterisk. The rules were simple. You had to drink, you had to converse intelligently, you had to entertain your fellow guests with poetry or wit, and if you failed at any of these, well, let's just say the consequences ranged from mild ridicule to being left behind when the party moved on. But that's where perfume comes in. The Greeks didn't just apply it to their bodies. They rubbed it into their hair, their skin, even their beards if they had them. It was a daily grooming ritual, but more than that, it was a way of signaling asterisk presence asterisk. To walk into a symposium reeking of the day's sweat or smelling faintly of goat cheese was to invite laughter, or worse, pity. Perfume, then, wasn't just about odor. It was about dignity asterisk. It was the olfactory equivalent of wearing the right toga, the sign that you belonged in this space, that you had taken the time to prepare yourself not only for the world, but for your own self-respect. And yet, there's another layer here. Perfume wasn't just about projecting confidence. It could also be a way of softening the edges when confidence was, shall we say, asterisk lacking. Imagine being the newest guest at a symposium, still learning the rules, fumbling over your words, perhaps even blushing, a Greek man's worst nightmare. A light anointing with perfume, something like asterisk kythia, a blend of cedar and cypress, would have done more than mask body odor. It would have created a subtle buffer between you and the world. It wasn't just about smelling good. It was about giving yourself a moment to breathe, a scent that said, I am here, but I am also prepared. In a culture where social grace was as prized as physical strength, perfume became a kind of olfactory shield, a way to smooth over the rough edges of inexperience. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. Perfume wasn't some magical elixir that transformed clumsy fools into Sophocles. It was just one tool in a much larger arsenal of social survival. The Greeks had other ways to navigate awkwardness, rhetoric, for starters, or the art of asterisk aronia asterisk, which roughly translates to dissimulation, but is better understood as the ability to feign ignorance when you're actually brilliant, a skill that would make modern political debates a walk in the agora. And yet, there's something undeniably human about turning to scent when words fail. It's a way of saying, I know I'm not perfect, but at least I smell like laurel and ambrosia. Let me pause here for a moment and let that sink in, because it's worth savoring. The idea that perfume was, in part, a social crutch is delightfully absurd, isn't it? To think that the ancient Greeks, those towering figures of philosophy and drama, might have also been the ones nervously dabbing a bit of myrrh on their wrists before stepping into a room full of peers. It's the kind of image that makes me chuckle every time I picture it. Socrates, mid-debate, suddenly realizing he's forgotten to anoint himself properly, and frantically rubbing his forearm with whatever oil is handy while trying not to draw attention to the fact. But here's the thing, they weren't alone in this. The Romans did much the same, though with more lavender and less humility. And if you think back to any social ritual you've attended, from a job interview to a wedding reception, you'll find that scent plays a similar role today. Cologne isn't just about personal hygiene. It's about sending a message. I am ready for this moment. It's the olfactory equivalent of a power suit or a well-tailored dress, a way to project confidence before you've even opened your mouth. So, did the ancient Greeks use perfume to hide social awkwardness? Not in the way we might imagine. No one was sneaking asterisk nard into their hair just to slip past an uncomfortable conversation unnoticed. But yes, in a quieter, more subtle way, as a signal of preparation, a marker of belonging, and perhaps, when things got a bit too heated or a bit too sweaty, a gentle reminder that no one is perfect, not even the philosophers who wrote plays about it. Let's take a closer look at how this worked in practice. Start with the ritual of anointing itself. The Greeks didn't just dab perfume on, they performed it. A Merbaterian asterisk, the tool used to apply oil or unguent, was often a small alabaster jar with a spout or a bronze implement that allowed for careful application. This wasn't something you did in secret. It was a public act of self-care. To be seen anointing yourself, especially before entering a social space like the gymnasium or the symposium, was to declare, I am taking this moment seriously. It was a way of saying, I am not just here, I am presenting myself. And then there's the scent itself. The Greeks used a variety of ingredients, but they favored the resinous, the bitterly sweet, the kind of aromas that lingered in memory long after the conversation ended. Myrrh, for example, wasn't just popular because it smelled nice, though it did. It was also used in religious rituals, associated with gods like Aphrodite and Dionysus. To anoint yourself with myrrh was to invoke not just pleasantness, but also a sense of sacredness, as if to say, I am more than flesh. I am part of something greater. In that way, perfume became a bridge between the mundane and the divine, a way to elevate even the most ordinary interactions. But let's not forget the darker side. Perfume could also be used to mask more than just awkwardness. It could hide the scent of alcohol, for instance, or the lingering aroma of unwashed bodies, a problem that still plagues humanity, I'm afraid. And in a culture where hygiene was as much about appearance as it was about health, perfume became a way to assert control. If you smelled like sweat, you were weak. If you smelled like cedar and cypress, you were asterisk civilized asterisk. There's something a bit dystopian in that, isn't there? The idea that your worth could be judged by the fragrance clinging to your skin. Yet, for all its social utility, perfume was never purely functional. It was also an art form. The Greeks didn't just slather on whatever oil they had. They experimented with blends, creating perfumes as complex and nuanced as their poetry. A good asterisk myrrh might include myrrh, cypress, laurel, or even the sap of the mastic tree, each ingredient carrying its own symbolic weight. Laurel, for instance, was sacred to Apollo, the god of music and prophecy. To smell like laurel was to invoke inspiration. Cypress, on the other hand, had funerary associations, a reminder that no scent could outlast mortality, though I suspect the Greeks would have appreciated a perfume that did. This brings us to another layer, the role of perfume in gender and status. Men were expected to anoint themselves daily, but women, when they weren't reclining at symposia, because, let's face it, those were asterisk men-only affairs, had their own scented rituals. A woman might anoint her hair with perfumed oil before entering the public sphere, a practice that wasn't just about smell, but also about marking her transition from private to public life. In this way, perfume became a kind of social currency, a way for both men and women to navigate the tricky waters of status and perception. And here's where things get particularly interesting. The Greeks weren't just using perfume to hide awkwardness. They were also using it to create asterisk it. You see, perfume was expensive. To smell like myrrh or cedar meant you had access to trade routes, to wealth, to connections. The scent itself became a signal of privilege, and the lack of it could be just as telling as its presence. Imagine being the poor relative at a party, trying to blend in with the elite by rubbing a bit of oil on your wrists, only for someone to sniff and say, "Ah, but that's not quite right. You're missing the nutmeg." In this way, perfume wasn't just about masking social ineptitude. It could also be used to highlight asterisk it, to turn embarrassment into a kind of performance art. Let me pause here to share a personal anecdote, one that I've often found amusing. A few years ago, I was researching the role of scent in ancient Greek theatre. Yes, plays had aromas. You're not surprised, are you? I stumbled upon a passage from a scholar who noted that actors, when portraying certain characters, would sometimes apply specific perfumes to enhance their roles. For example, a tragic hero might anoint himself with myrrh, while a comic character might use something lighter, like rose, though roses, of course, were somewhat controversial in ancient Greece, as they were associated with Aphrodite's more indiscreet adventures. The thought that struck me was this: even in performance, perfume could be a tool for social navigation. An actor, stepping into the role of a king or a god, would use scent to signal his transformation, just as we might don a crown or a toga today. But there's also something deeply human about it. To know that an ancient Greek, standing on stage before hundreds of people, would pause for a moment to rub a bit of oil on his neck, that he was using perfume not just to play a role, but to prepare himself for the weight of being seen. Well, that's a reminder that even the most legendary figures among us are still just people, trying to make it through another day with dignity. Now, let's talk about the symposium again, because it's the perfect microcosm for this kind of social perfume use. The symposium was, in many ways, a test of civilized behavior. You had to drink the right amount, not too little, not too much. You had to converse without being obnoxious or overly silent, and you had to entertain your peers with stories or poetry that didn't veer into the too lewd or offensive, though, let's be honest, that line was often blurred. And throughout all this, perfume played a quiet but crucial role. First, there was the act of anointing before the symposium began. This wasn't just about hygiene. It was about transition asterisk. To rub oil into your skin was to say, I am leaving behind the day's labor and entering a space where words matter more than work. It was a ritual that marked the shift from productivity to pleasure, from the physical to the intellectual. And if you were new to the symposium, or simply new to being a man among men, this act of anointing would have given you something tangible to do while your nerves settled. Then there was the scent itself, which could set the tone for the evening. A symposium might open with guests anointed in lighter, fresher scents like laurel or cypress, giving way to something richer, myrrh or amber, as the wine flowed and conversations grew more heated, or, if you're being optimistic, more profound. The perfume wasn't just background noise, it was part of the experience, could soothe or stimulate, depending on the blend, and in that way it mirrored the ebb and flow of human interaction. But here, that's where the social awkwardness comes back into play. Not everyone at a symposium was equally skilled at the art of conversation. Some men would arrive with eloquence already in hand, their words as polished as their myrrh. Others would arrive, perhaps a bit too greasy from the day's work or the night's wine, fumbling for the right phrase while their hosts watched with amused detachment. And if you were the latter, well, perfume could be your ally. Consider this. If you smelled faintly of sweat, even after anointing yourself, you were already socially marked. But if you carried a scent that was both pleasant and subtle, a blend that said, I am here, but I am not overwhelming you, you might just slip past the first layer of scrutiny without anyone noticing your hesitation. It's the same principle we see today with cologne. The right scent can make you seem more approachable, more put together, even if your confidence is still taking a backseat to your curiosity. And yet, there's a dark humor in this, isn't there? The idea that the ancient Greeks, those paragons of philosophy and intellect, were also the ones nervously dabbing oil on their beards before entering a room full of peers. It's almost endearing. To think that even Socrates, in his sandals and Hammadian, might have paused for a moment to adjust his scent before launching into another Socratic dialogue is to humanize history in the best way possible. Let me take a detour here, because it's worth it, to talk about the role of scent in Greek religion. The gods didn't just smell good, they were perfumed. Temples would burn incense, priests would anoint statues with sacred oils, and offerings like myrrh or frankincense would fill the air with a cloud of divine aroma. This wasn't just about making the space smell nice. It was about creating a sensory experience that transcended the mundane. Imagine standing in the sanctuary of Aphrodite at Corinth, the air thick with the scent of laurel and rose, though again, roses might have been a bit too romantic for some. The perfume wasn't just there to mask the smell of burning fat from sacrifices. It was to remind you that you were in the presence of something greater. And if you were a worshipper, perhaps a bit nervous about your own devotional skills, the scent would have been a comfort, a way to say, I am not alone in this. This brings us back to social awkwardness, but on a larger scale. If perfume could elevate the mundane into the sacred, it could also elevate the socially inept into the tolerable asterisk. A man who stumbled over his words at a symposium might find solace in the fact that he was anointed with the same oils as the gods. A woman who felt out of place among men might take comfort in the scent of her hair, knowing it carried the same fragrance as the myrrh offered to Aphrodite. And here's the thing. Perfume wasn't just about masking inadequacy. It was also about enhancing adequacy. The right scent could make you seem more confident, more capable, even if your inner monologue was still in full panic mode. It's the same principle we see with power dressing today. If you look and smell like you belong, people will treat you as if you do. Let's not forget the role of perfume in Greek medicine, either. The Greeks believed that certain scents could cure ailments, from headaches to depression. Myrrh was used for pain relief, rose for emotional balance, though, again, Aphrodite might have had something to say about that. In this way, perfume wasn't just a social tool, it was a practical one. If you were feeling nervous before a symposium, or before any public performance, anointing yourself with the right oil could be both a ritual and a remedy. This dual role of perfume, as both mask and enhancement, is what makes it so fascinating in the context of social awkwardness. It wasn't just about hiding your flaws. It was about framing them in a way that made them seem like virtues. If you smelled like myrrh, your stumbles weren't just mistakes. They were part of a larger narrative, one that said, I am more than this moment. And then there's the question of authenticity. Could perfume ever truly mask awkwardness, or was it always a performance? This is where things get philosophical, and I do love a good philosophical detour. Consider the symposium again. A man might anoint himself with myrrh before entering, only to realize halfway through that his hosts are expecting something lighter, perhaps laurel. He's caught in a scent-based social trap, and the only way out is to perform authenticity, to act as if he's always smelled like laurel, even though he's just now discovering it. In this way, perfume becomes a kind of social contract, a set of rules that everyone agrees to follow, even if they don't always fit. You're expected to smell a certain way, but if you don't, you can asterisk fake it until you make it. And in that fake it until you make it moment, there's both humor and pathos. Let me share another anecdote, this one from my own research. I was reading a description of an ancient Greek banquet where guests would recline on couches and dine while entertainers performed. The passage mentioned how the scent of the perfumed oil used for anointing could linger on the couches, creating a kind of olfactory memory for each guest. If you sat in a place where someone had recently anointed themselves with myrrh, you would asterisk carry asterisk that scent into your own conversation, a silent tribute to the person who had preceded you. The thought that struck me was this: perfume isn't just about the present, it's about the past and the future. It's a way of saying, I am connected to others, even if I'm not quite sure how yet. And in that connection, there's both comfort and uncertainty, a perfect metaphor for social awkwardness. Let's talk about the role of perfume in Greek love poetry, too, because where else will we see the intersection of scent, desire, and social navigation more clearly? Sappho, for instance, writes about a woman anointing her hair with perfumed oil before gazing upon her beloved. The scent isn't just background detail. It's part of the seduction, a way to say, I'm not just here. I am offering myself. And then there's Anacreon, who wrote about the pleasures of wine and women, and perfume, of course. His poems are filled with references to scents like myrrh and cypress, which aren't just about smell, but also about status asterisk. To be associated with such perfumes was to be part of an elite world, one where awkwardness was either absent or so well performed that it became a virtue. In this way, perfume becomes a kind of language, a way to communicate without words. If you smelled like myrrh, you were saying, I am part of the divine. If you smelled like cypress, you were saying, I acknowledge mortality. And if you smelled like rose, well, let's just say Aphrodite would have had something to say about that. Let me bring this back to social awkwardness one last time, because it's worth dwelling on. The Greeks didn't have the luxury of modern psychology to explain away their nerves. They had perfume. And in a culture where status and perception mattered as much as they did, scent was a powerful tool for self-presentation. Imagine being a young man at your first symposium, trying to fit in among seasoned drinkers and conversationalists. You anoint yourself with oil, perhaps a bit too eagerly, hoping the scent will carry you through the evening. And then there's the wine. How do you drink enough to appear sophisticated but not so much that you become obvious? The perfume is your ally, a way to signal I am here, I belong asterisk, even if your inner voice is still whispering, do you really belong? And when someone sniffs and says, ah, myrrh, how appropriate, you've passed the first test. You're not just awkward, you're asterisk cultivated asterisk. And in that moment, the scent becomes more than oil on skin. It's a badge of passage, a way to say, I am becoming who I need to be. Let me end with this thought. Perfume isn't just about hiding awkwardness. It's about asterisk framing it, about turning it into something that can be both acknowledged and overlooked. And in that framing, there's a kind of magic, a way to say, I am more than this moment asterisk, even if I'm not quite sure who I'll be yet. So the next time you find yourself nervously dabbing cologne on your wrist before a social gathering, whether it's a symposium or a modern-day cocktail party, remember the ancient Greeks. They faced the same uncertainties, the same fears of being seen and judged. and they had perfume to help them along. And if that doesn't make you feel a little less alone in your awkwardness, I don't know what will. Final thought. Asterisk perfume is the silent partner of social awkwardness. A way to say, I am here, I am trying, and for now, this scent will carry me. This exploration of perfume as a tool for navigating social awkwardness in ancient Greece blends history, literature, and personal reflection. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you'd like to dive deeper into any aspect.